As he has introduced, I am Secretary DPIIT, so it's my pleasant duty to welcome you to India. India is a very rich and ancient historical country. It has varied traditions, cultures and heritage. Telangana is one of the 36 constituent states and UTs, so you got a glimpse of what it is from Jayesh. We are actually a mega diverse country in terms of biodiversity, and it's a birthplace of 4 major religions of the world. So this is what India is. Hyderabad, as Jayesh mentioned about Hyderabad, I'll just add one line to that. By UNESCO, it has been declared as a creative city of gastronomy. And I hope you enjoy the gastronomy of this place. So here you are. Apart from that, we have a very rich ecosystem of startups in the country. We have something known as district, which is the lowest administrative unit. So the whole country has about 765 districts. In more than 650 districts, we have got registered startups. It has become that wide movement. It has become an inclusive movement. 50% of the startups have women on the board. They were initiated by one of the women at least. So that is a very rich and varied startup system. And when we talk about the important ecosystems in the country, the top 4-5 names which come up, Hyderabad is one of them. And the Tea Hub is a really vibrant place where you must go and visit, where a visit has been scheduled in the afternoon. India has taken over the presidency of G20 in very challenging times, when the world is suffering from the after effects of once in a century or once in a lifetime kind of pandemic. We have conflicts in the world which are driving crisis of fuel and energy and fertilizers. There are economic uncertainties. In these challenging times, India has taken over the presidency. So therefore, what we have chosen, our theme is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. That is an ancient Indian philosophy, which basically means the world is one family. So we have translated in English the philosophy, or the for G20 we say one earth, one family, one future. So we understand that all of us will come together, will have deliberations in a manner that as if we are one family, and work for the common future of the earth. As Chintan has already brought it out, that a Startup 20 is a new engagement group. And he also talked about ambidexterity of G20, which is B20 and Startup 20. And as DPIIT department, we actually coordinate both the groups. So we provide that link between B20 and Startup 20. In India, when we look at ourselves, why did we propose this? We believe that next 2 to 3 decades, given the structural reforms which have happened in the country, the policies which we have put in place, the demographic dividend, and the talented youth of the country, India is going to remain one of the fastest growing large economies for the next 3 decades. And when we look at it, we understand that startups is very crucial to driving this growth for the next 2 to 3 decades. Startups provide all the solutions related to knowledge, innovation and sustainability. In India's development agenda, we have actually leapfrogged and mainstream sustainability into our development agenda, and we find very innovative solutions coming from startups all over the place. And that is the reason why we propose a new engagement group. And I am extremely grateful to all the colleagues from all the countries, who are almost 30 countries are represented here. And all of you actually agreed. And as we all know that G20 goes with the consensus. Since all of you agreed, we were able to constitute this group, and I am sure through the deliberations we'll be able to create a collaborative framework which will provide solutions to the global problems in coming days. India started the ecosystem startup initiative in 2016. It's just a 7-year-old story. Not that startups were not there before that, but officially we took an initiative like what Jayesh has brought in. We brought in a facilitative environment. We have a Prime Minister who has a mass appeal. So he launched the startup initiative. What it has done is, number one, it has changed the mindset of the local population, the local youth. As an administrator who has spent more than 30 years in government, I know, before that we would come across huge set of people who would be asking and lining up for the jobs. A bright young fellow coming out of IITs and IIMs, the institution of global repute, he would also be looking for a job in a multi-corporate world or going to these top companies and contributing to the growth and success of those companies. Now the mindset has completely changed. Most of the top students who come out, they want to set up their own venture. They want to find out innovative solutions. They want to contribute to the solutions of the global problems. That is a change in mindset which has taken place. So as a result, in just a matter of 7 years, from just about 450 odd startups, the startup ecosystem in India has become, it is now 88,000 registered startups. We have got more than 100 unicorns. That's why now the world tells us that India has become the third largest startup ecosystem in a short frame of time. And more importantly, the rate of growth is faster than the top 2 countries which are above us. Like number of unicorns being added, we are number 2. And in terms of new startups getting registered, we are number 1. So the point is, how did this happen? We'll share our experience. I'm sure my colleagues will be doing that. But we should all, in a collaborative framework, listen to each of the country, understand from each other. We have got some issue notes made with Chintan, who is a chairperson. He himself is a very great, he's a great driver. He started the whole concept of incubators and tinkering labs being set up from the government side. He heads that group. And Government of India came up with a lot of facilitative environment where we give tax breaks, we give breaks to angel investments, we give a lot of other kinds of support, seed funds. We have set up some seed funds, we have set up some fund of funds. And then the whole ecosystem started growing around this, which was already there in the nascent stage, but got a huge flip through this. We'll share it in detail when opportunity arises. I wish all the success to this new group to come out with a collaborative framework, laying the foundations of a collaborative framework which we'll discuss through the year and come out with a system which will take the global startup ecosystem forward. And let us all celebrate this historic day because the new engagement group is being set up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On a personal note, I must say that Secretary Jain is one person I know in the government who has always said that anything startup, count me in. So we'll next hear from Mr. Parmeshwaran Iyer. He, for the many of you from abroad, he goes by Param. He's the CEO of Niti Aayog, Government of India Central Think Tank. NITI, another acronym that you may hear. It stands for the National Institution for Transforming India and is a clever acronym that in Hindi means policy but also means righteousness. So this body is working to expand the innovation ecosystem of our nation for it to become more inclusive, more capable and more sophisticated. Mr. Iyer.
Thank you, Chintan. Honorable Minister, Cabinet Minister, Minister of State, my predecessor in Niti Aayog, fortunately Amitabh the Sherpa is here as well, and Anurag, dignitaries on the dais, distinguished participants. It's a great pleasure to be here in the right spot, Chintan, for the photo op as well. And just to add, not much to add to what Chintan and Anurag have spoken about the ecosystem for startups in India, but also in Hyderabad, which Jayesh spoke about. This is one of the most sort of happening startup places in India, if you like, Hyderabad and its vicinity. So it's great to be here. It's the perfect context and atmosphere for discussing the scale-up of startups in India. Anything, by the way, I miss out, Amitabh is going to fill in. He's been running NITI for 7 years. All the great work NITI has done in startups, innovation, technology, he will let you know in case I miss out anything. So I'm counting on Amitabh for that. We have said a lot about the sort of national ecosystem for startups. And there are some big numbers here, which Chintan was telling me over breakfast. So we have, I think, close to 90,000 startups in India with, 60, 70 startups starting every day. So it's a phenomenal explosion of startups. And everywhere you go, you meet youngsters who have, started startups in diverse fields: biotechnology, agriculture, healthcare, solid waste, everything, employment. So it's really exploding. So it's a pleasure to be here today at this first meeting of Startup 20 to really put this engagement group to get it started. Now, Chintan spoke about the contribution of India and the logo of zero, which was India's contribution. So innovation has really been at the heart of Indian.
It's not me that you have to hear to them. So I leave the floor open to them. What I am saying is not so important at what inputs they have to give. So over to you, sir.
So let me first welcome all of you to this interaction. I take this opportunity of welcoming my colleague, Mr. Anurag Jain, who's Secretary Department of DPIIT, which is now known as DPIIT, Internal Trade and Policy. And Shruti is the Joint Secretary there. And Mr. Ashish Sinha, who is Joint Secretary in the G20 Secretariat of the Ministry of External Affairs. So we are truly delighted that all of you are here because this is a very important meeting of G20. Startup 20 is a new engagement group which has been constituted during the G20 movement. G20 now has 12 engagement groups, one of which is India's contribution to the G20 movement, which is the Startup 20. Now, Startup 20 as an engagement group has been constituted because of India's belief and the Prime Minister's commitment that the world needs more digitization, it needs more technological leapfrogging, it needs to make a quantum jump because the world is going through a recessionary phase. 1/3 of the world is facing recession, 70 countries in the world are facing a global debt crisis. Whenever there has been a crisis like this, new technologies, new disruptions have accelerated the pace of growth. And our belief is that Startup 20 will play a very leading and a key role in drafting out new policies and driving innovation worldwide. G20 is very important because G20 countries comprise of 19 countries plus Europe. Actually, that makes it 43 countries in all, and entire Europe comes in. They account for about 85% of the global GDP. They account for about 90% of the patents. They account for 78% of the global trade, and they account for 2/3 of the global population. G20 is important because in the past, whenever there was a crisis, the G20 was able to take several measures to accelerate the pace of growth. It's a group for economic growth and progress. India took over the presidency from Indonesia, and this is the first time that 4 developing countries, one after another, Indonesia, India, Brazil, South Africa, will hold the presidency. What is happening in the world is that the share of developed countries, which used to be 66%, has come down to 49%, and the share of emerging markets, which used to be about 19%, has moved up. So the share of emerging markets is going up. Now, G20 is the only forum which comprises of both developed and emerging markets. It is unlike United Nations, where there are 186 countries and it's very difficult to arrive at a consensus. In G20, when they arrive at a consensus, they are able to accelerate the pace of growth. It is not like G7, where there are only 7 of the developed countries are involved. This has both developed and developing countries. We are taking over the presidency when there are very many challenges. There's a challenge of recession, there's a challenge of global debt, there's a challenge of climate action and climate finance, there's a challenge of food, fuel, fertilizer, there's a challenge of multilateral institutions being restructured for 21st century. Many of these issues are our priorities for discussion during the course of the year. They will be discussed in the many working groups. There is a finance track, there is a Sherpa track, all of which will feed into the leaders' communique. The leaders' meeting will be held on 9th and 10th of September in New Delhi, but we are doing over 215 meetings in 56 cities of India. 215 meetings in 56 cities of India, one of which is Hyderabad. There will be several meetings here, and we are working in partnership with the state government to drive this. The reason why Startup India was held in Hyderabad, because there is a tea hub here, there's a women hub here, there is a lot of movement for startups, and we have got participation from all countries here. They will discuss several issues on which my colleague will talk about, Mr. Anurag Jain will talk about. But I just want to say that whatever the Startup 20 decides, will be a very major component of our final communique. That will be a very important input into our communique. And for us, innovation, technological disruption, in the age of machine learning, in the age of artificial intelligence, in the age of cloudification of data, in the age of digitization, and also when we are driving electric mobility, green hydrogen, battery storage, many PLI schemes, production linked incentive schemes, all this would require disruption of a very high order. There is a lot of experience sharing to be done with developed and emerging markets. That is what will be done here. Issues of financing, issues of corporate governance will all be discussed. So I would request now my colleague, Mr. Anurag Jain, to dwell on Startup 20 and talk about what is our objective and how do we look at it in the future.
Thank you, sir, for giving the overview of what G20 is going to do. Within this G20, as sir has already pointed out, we had proposed Startup 20 as one of the engagement groups. It was very clear when we look at the prospective growth history of the country, when we were working for the Vision 2047. It is very critical and crucial to the India's growth history, because we firmly believe that the growth will come from knowledge, innovation and sustainability. And startups provide solution on all these 3 counts. And since the launch of a startup initiative in January 2016, in this short period, India's ecosystem has grown to be the 3rd largest startup ecosystem in the world. third largest in terms of unicorn, that is how the world measures. But the important part is the addition of new unicorns is the second highest. And addition of the new startups is the highest. So we are third largest and growing faster than the two countries which are above us. So this startup thing was conceptualized, Startup 20, and we have come out with zero draft of the issue notes which has been shared. So there are 3 tracks which will be there. First track will be foundation and alliance, which is sort of trying to get the cooperation of the whole world. Second is finance, and third is inclusivity and sustainability. So these are the 3 tracks, and there will be 3 track meetings hereafter. This was the inception meeting. There will be 3 track meetings, one in Sikkim, one in Andaman and Nicobar, and one in Bangalore. And then there will be a summit meeting in Gurgaon. So this is the overall plan, and hopefully we will be able to come out with something which will be able to create a framework for driving the global ecosystem to find out solutions for the global problems. We are open to any questions if you have. Any question, we will be very happy to respond to all of you. Any question?
Ravi Kumar from the Hindu, sir. Is there a possibility that at the end of this summit, there will be efforts made in terms of creating a fund for startup at a global level, since you are also mentioning multilateral agencies will also be part of this. So is there a possibility for such a development?
So my suggestion is that different countries have a fund of funds. India also has a fund of funds which is operated by SIDBI. Now, what shape the discussions take place? We are at the beginning of this. Today is the inception meeting, and there will be 3 more rounds of meetings of startups. My request would be that if we decide everything at our level, it will not be correct. Let the startups, there are investors, there are startups, there are a lot of people who invest in startups, there are venture funds, there are private equity funds, they are all here. So let them discuss and arrive at the final shape of what they want to give to the startup global movement. Whatever they decide, I can assure you that we'll be very happy to take it forward in the G20 movement. But for us to decide at our level or at this stage will not be appropriate. It's an issue of debate and discussion within the Startup 20 movement.
Hi sir, this is Goparaji from ABP News. So nowadays, present scenario is so many foreign companies are giving layoffs to the employees. What is the condition in India, and what is the startups companies in India present scenario?
The point is, this is what you would have heard even IMF and World Bank saying, that a bright spot among the dark horizons about India. There are, as Sir brought it out, that India has taken over the presidency of G20 at a time when it is very challenging for the world. There are headwinds because of various reasons which Shri Prasad has already outlined, so I will not repeat that. But what has happened in India, India still has managed to grow at 7% this year, on top of last year's 8.7, which people talked about V-shaped recovery. What has happened in India, one of the major building blocks is public digital infrastructure, what you know as India Stack. We have a identity layer, which is Aadhaar, as all of you know that more than 1 billion people have their identity on that. Then we have a cashless payment structure, which was built on UPI, Jan-Dhan, Mobile, Trinity. Then we have a paperless consent, third layer. And these 3 layers have put together has come to be known as the India Stack. what this has done, it has facilitated innovations of all kinds, be it in health, be it in education, be it in emerging technologies, apart from the fintech which India has already grown to be a very strong thing. So when India grew at 7%, the digital economy grew at 15.5% or 15.6, around that, between 15 and 16%. So India is also facing a lot of headwinds. It is not that India is not facing. But in spite of that, because of the kind of structural reforms which happened over the last few years, the policies which have been put in place, the talent and the youth of the country, India has still been able to survive and sort of still float along, and that's why the World Bank and IMFs are putting India as the shining spot. That is the difference. But still, it is not that. If the headwinds were not there, maybe instead of 7%, India would have grown at a much higher pace. So the number of unicorns which are being added in 21 in spite of COVID, in 22, the addition of new unicorns has come down because India is also facing those headwinds. So we can't ignore that India is not facing the challenges.
From the meeting? So the takeaway after the 3 days, after the 2 days discussions, they will come out with a communique here that will be circulated. Then there are 2 other rounds of meeting which startups will have in different cities of India. Then there will be a final communique which will then go into the Sherpa track. So, and then finally the relevant portion will go into the final this thing. But broadly, what they are discussing today, they have come out with a major issue note, and that issue note, if you look at it, has focused on 3 broad issues, and the 3 broad issues are foundation and alliances. How do you create that means how do you create an ecosystem? How do you create an ecosystem for innovation and startups across the world? Secondly, driving capital and support for startups because of the dollar strengthening, the focus on inflation, liquidity is getting impacted. Though in India we've continued to get a lot of money into the startup movement. 21 was an exceptional year, but this year again last year again we've got about close to 25 billion. So how do you drive capital and flow into the startup movement? And thirdly, the third issue they have looked at is how do startups make a difference on sustainable development goals? That is, how do startups make a difference on education, health, nutrition, agriculture, etc. So social startups will also play a key role. These are the 3 broad key issues which are being discussed, and from there the recommendations will come out. So with this, since there are no other questions, I would like to thank all the media of Hyderabad. I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. I would like to thank in particular the PIB. Madam, thank you so much. And I would like to thank all the staff of PIB who's helped us do this. Thank you very much. We are very, very grateful to all of you for having joined us today. Please join us for tea and coffee outside. Thank you so much.
Sir.